Okay, so you know that feeling, right? Like
Uh,
when everything just gets to be a bit much. I mean, that sense of pressure or worry. Think back over the last year. Who hasn't felt at least a little bit stressed, right? And if that TED Talk audience Kelly McGonigal spoke to is anything to go by, it feels like stress is something that we all deal with. But here's the thing. What if we've got this whole stress thing wrong? Like, what if the idea that stress is just plain bad for us? What if that's not the whole picture? What if that idea itself is actually causing us more trouble than the stress itself?
yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. We're going deep on some research that really makes you think. And we're using Kelly McGonigal's TED Talk as our main source here. And get ready, because some of your ideas about stress, well, they might get turned upside down. Because this idea that stress is always a bad thing, yeah, it could be that we're missing a big piece of the puzzle.
I think you're right. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive, to really understand this research that says how we think about stress can seriously affect our health. Hopefully, we'll have some of those aha moments where things suddenly make sense in a new way. I have a feeling this topic's full of them. So, to get us started, what's the main finding that really changed how we think about stress?
Well, the research that really got this whole thing rolling was a study that went on for 8 years, and it tracked a huge group of people, 30,000 adults here in the US. And they asked them two simple questions. First, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? And then, do you think that stress is bad for your health?
Pretty straightforward questions.
So,
I bet they got all kinds of different answers. So what happened when they looked at all the data?
at first, it looked like everything we thought about stress was true. It seemed like, yeah, stress is definitely bad. The folks who said they had a lot of stress were 43% more likely to die during the study.
Wow, 43%. That really seems to say that stress is bad for you. But I have a feeling there's more to the story, right?
You got it. There's a really important detail. That increased risk was only true for the people who also believed that stress was bad for them.
Wait, so it wasn't just being stressed that was the problem. It was believing that stress was bad too.
Exactly. Now get this. The people who said they had a lot of stress but didn't think it was harmful, they actually had the lowest risk of dying in the whole study, even lower than the people who said they had low stress.
So the people who were dealing with a lot of stress but had a good attitude about it, they were actually healthier than people who weren't as stressed but worried about it all the time.
That's basically it. And based on these findings, the researchers figured that over those 8 years, something like 182,000 Americans might have died earlier than they should have. And it wasn't directly because of stress itself, but because they believed stress was harmful.
182,000 people.
Yeah.
That's a huge number. I remember McGonigal saying this could be like the 15th biggest cause of death. So how does that compare to other big health problems?
Well, to put it into perspective, that number is bigger than the number of deaths from things like skin cancer, melanoma, HIV/AIDS, even murders. So all of a sudden, this idea that stress is bad for you, this thing everyone seems to believe, well, it looks like it could be a major health problem all by itself. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. More people may be dying from thinking stress is bad than from some really serious diseases.
It really makes you think differently about all the time and energy people spend trying to avoid stress. Maybe there's a better way to deal with it. This research basically leads to a really big question, don't you think?
It absolutely does. After seeing these results, the big question was, can changing how you think about stress actually make you healthier? And from what we're learning from science, the answer seems to be a big yes.
Okay, so it seems like what we believe about stress can really affect our health. But how did that actually work? How can our thoughts and feelings change how our body reacts to pressure?
That's where this really interesting study from Harvard comes in. They did something called a social stress test. Imagine this. You're in a lab, bright lights, a camera right on you. You got to give a 5-minute speech, totally unprepared, about all your weaknesses, and you're giving the speech to a bunch of people who are judging you. Like, that's not bad enough. Then they give you a tough math problem, and the person running the test is giving you negative feedback the whole time and trying to rush you. It's designed to make you super stressed.
Just thinking about that makes me nervous. It sounds like the perfect recipe for triggering all those classic stress symptoms.
Exactly. And how do we usually understand those physical things that happen when we're stressed out? The faster heartbeat, the quick breathing, sweating, all that. We usually think of that as anxiety. Like it's a sign we're not handling things well.
Yeah, it feels like our body's going haywire, but in a bad way.
But here's a different way to think about it. What if those feelings weren't bad? What if they were actually good? In this Harvard study, they taught people to see those exact same physical reactions as helpful, like your heart beating faster. That's not panic. It's your body sending more oxygen and energy to your brain and muscles so you can deal with the problem. And breathing faster, that's not you losing it. It's you getting more oxygen to help you think clearly. So instead of thinking, I'm freaking out, you're thinking, my body is giving me what I need to focus and do well.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So when they encouraged people to think about stress this way, what happened?
Well, the results were pretty amazing. People who changed how they thought about their stress response said they felt less stressed overall, they were less anxious, and a lot more confident about handling the stressful situation.
So they felt better mentally. But did that actually change how their bodies were reacting to the stress?
That's the really cool part. The researchers were also watching what was happening in their bodies. Usually, when you're stressed, your heart rate goes up, but your blood vessels get tighter. And that tightening is important because if it happens too long, it can put a lot of strain on your heart and blood vessels, and that can lead to things like high blood pressure.
Right, it's like having your body tense up for too long. That can't be good in the long run.
Exactly. But here's the thing. In the group that was told to think of their stress response as helpful, their heart rates still went up, like their bodies were still getting ready for action, but their blood vessels stayed relaxed.
So they were alert and ready, but without all that tension in their blood vessels. That sounds a lot healthier.
It really is. This kind of reaction, where your heart rate is up but your blood vessels are relaxed, is actually a lot like what happens when you're feeling joy or even courage. Think about it. Your heart beats faster when you're excited about something, or when you're facing a challenge you feel ready to take on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So by changing how we think about stress, we're basically telling our bodies how to react.
Exactly. And if you think about it, we deal with stressful things throughout our lives. So this small, the important difference in how our body reacts could really matter for our long-term health, especially for our hearts and blood vessels. It really shows how powerful our minds are. They can change how our bodies react to stress.
It's amazing how much control our minds have over our physical health. So we've talked about reframing how we think about stress as it happens. But there's another piece to this puzzle, right? Something about how connecting with others can change our experience of stress.
Absolutely. And this part often gets overlooked. Stress can actually make us more social. This sounds weird, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed, our first instinct might be to hide away. But our biology is actually telling us to do something else.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this connection between stress and our social side. What's the science behind it?
Well, it all comes down to this hormone called oxytocin. A lot of people know it as the cuddle hormone. It gets released when we hug or have other physical contact. And while it's definitely important for feeling close and connected, it actually does a lot more than that. Think of it like a brain booster for our social skills.
So it's more than just that warm feeling you get from a hug.
Way more. Oxytocin actually preps our brains to do things that make our relationships stronger. It makes us want to be physically closer to people we care about. It helps us understand and share other people's feelings. And it even makes us want to be more helpful and supportive. It's like it's getting us ready to connect with others.
That makes sense. So how does this tie back to stress?
Here's the surprising part. Oxytocin is also a stress hormone. It gets released by your pituitary gland when you're stressed, along with adrenaline, which is that hormone that gets your heart pumping when you're in that fight or flight mode.
Hold on. So the same hormone that makes us feel connected and loving also comes out when we're stressed. That's unexpected.
It is. And when your body releases oxytocin because you're stressed, it makes you want to look for support from other people. Your body is basically telling you to reach out to someone, to talk about what's going on, instead of keeping it all bottled up inside. It also makes you more aware of when other people around you might be struggling, so you're more likely to offer help. And it makes you want to be around people who care about you when things are tough.
So it's like our bodies are programmed to connect with others as a way to handle stress.
Right on. And this social side of stress isn't just about feeling better emotionally. It's good for our physical health, too. Oxytocin actually protects our hearts and blood vessels. It's a natural anti-inflammatory, which means it helps reduce swelling, and it helps keep our blood vessels relaxed even when we're under pressure.
That's completely different from what we usually think about when we talk about stress in our hearts.
I know, right? And here's something even more amazing. Our hearts actually have special spots for oxytocin to attach to. This means oxytocin can help heart cells repair themselves and heal damage from stress. So it's directly making our hearts stronger.
Wow. So stress can actually trigger a process that helps repair some of the damage it might cause.
It really can. And what's super cool is that these heart-healthy benefits of oxytocin get even stronger when we interact with other people and get support from them. It's like a positive loop. When we ask for help or when we help someone else who is stressed, our bodies release more oxytocin. This helps us have a healthier response to stress overall and bounce back faster from tough situations.
So by being there for each other during stressful times, we're not just making each other feel better, we're actually helping each other be healthier.
That's exactly it. Our stress response has this incredible built-in system for making us more resilient to stress, and it all comes down to connecting with other people.
This completely changes how we think about stress. It's not just a bad thing we need to avoid. It can actually be a sign that it's time to connect with our support system and to tap into our inner strength. There's another study, wasn't there? One that really showed how caring for others can affect how stress impacts us.
Oh yeah, there was. They looked at about 1,000 adults from age 34 all the way to 93. They asked these people how much stress they had been through in the past year and how much time they spent helping out their friends, neighbors, or people in their community.
So they were looking at how much stress people were under and also how much they were giving back to others. What did they find?
The first results kind of echoed what we saw in the other studies. Going through really tough times, like money problems or serious family issues, increased people's chance of dying by a pretty significant 30%.
30%, that's a big jump. It really shows that stress can be dangerous for our health.
No doubt. But here's the really interesting part. That increased risk didn't apply to the people who spent time caring for others. Even if they were dealing with a lot of stress in their own lives, the people who regularly helped and supported others didn't have that higher risk of dying. It was like the stress didn't affect them in the same way.
It's like being kind and helpful was protecting them from the negative effects of stress.
Exactly. It seems like caring for others makes us a lot more resilient to the harmful effects of stress, and it really reinforces this idea that stress doesn't have to be bad for us. How we think about stress and what we do, like connecting with and supporting others, can totally change how stress impacts us.
So to sum it all up, we have two powerful choices when it comes to stress. We can choose to see our stress response as a way to get energy and focus, kind of like what McGonagall calls the biology of courage. And we can actively choose to connect with and help others, especially when we're feeling stressed ourselves. And doing that seems to make us much stronger and more resilient. It really comes down to our mindset and what we choose to do.
Right. And it means that stress doesn't have to be something we're afraid of and try to avoid. It can be a signal to connect with our support system and a source of energy that we can use to do amazing things.
It's a totally different way to see stress. It's kind of empowering, right? Instead of feeling like we're victims of stress, we realize we have the power to choose how we respond to it and how it ultimately affects us. So as you're going through those unavoidable stressful times in your own life, think about how you usually react to pressure. Do you see those physical feelings as something scary and bad? Or could you try seeing them as your body getting ready to rise to the challenge? And how could you make a point of reaching out to others, both to ask for help and to give it during those tough times? Maybe learning more about how our mindset and our connections with others can affect us could be a really good next step in your own journey with stress. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.